Hey, today I'm going to be working on my 1987 Honda VFR700F2 Interceptor, also known as the RC26. So I have the fairings off of it, and I spent most of last week and this weekend patching the exposed fiberglass from years of somebody else riding it. I bought it about 2 summers ago, and I immediately noticed there was no paint on it, so that was a red flag for me. I asked the guy why it didn't have any of the decals, the racing decals that came with the bike, and he said that some of them came like that from factory, and I chose to believe him. And unfortunately, I later found out that the fairings are not factory, and honestly that's for the better, because the ones that came on the bike are just plastic, whereas the ones he bought are fiberglass. So it allowed me to fix them up this weekend. I didn't film that because, one, I was wearing a respirator during it, so it would have just been muffled, and two, I really didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't want to pass on any false information. Three, it looks pretty jank, and so now that it looks like that, I have an idea on how to fix that and at least make a temporary permanent solution for the motorcycle, just so that there's no exposed fiberglass whenever I ride it in the rain. So this was one of the rear fenders I tried to fix last year using JB Weld, and I mean, this thing is just in terrible shape. It is from 1987. It was probably left out in the sun most of the time. I don't think that the owner covered the bike, and from what I could tell, he bought the bike off of his brother when his brother needed money. So I don't even know the full story of the bike, but most of the scratches, I was told, came from kids knocking it over in a garage. So instead of keeping this, which was like a 3-piece system, I bought this 1 piece off of the same company that the other fairings were made from, and that was AirTech, and it's based in California. And that piece up there cost me $300, and it's completely fiberglass. All of these are fiberglass, so I was able to use my resin that I bought and a fiberglass mat, as well as some Bondo to patch these up. So once they were patched up, it just looked kind of messy. I'll show you in a little bit here. So I thought of putting a pattern on it, and since the whole bike is white and I had black spray paint from a previous project, I figured I'd do a cow pattern, and it turned out really nice yesterday. So I'll show you both of those here. So this is what the fairing looks like after I'm done patching it. I got the Bondo on one side, and you can see the cow pattern's already drawn out for the idea I have for this piece specifically. And some of the things I repaired were reinforcing these holes so that when the wind blows as I'm riding, it doesn't like crack it more than it was. I fixed this crack completely. I found that the resin and the fiberglass mat were much easier to work with than the Bondo. The Bondo kind of just filled in the holes, but it just sucked in general. I would have rather went with the fiberglass mat. I don't have the money for a real paint job, so this is my idea on how to fix my mistakes. It looks terrible to me, and also you have to paint it regardless. So the cow print yesterday turned out to look like this, which up close you can still see like a lot of where I was patching it and trying to reinforce it. But if I back up, it honestly doesn't look half bad, and it's just a cow pattern. I think it's a pretty good temporary permanent solution for my motorcycle. I'll start by removing the Sharpie from this, because whenever I painted this, you can still see some of the Sharpie lines. They did not want to come off. Even with alcohol, which is an organic solvent, it should have taken the Sharpie off. It didn't. So I'm going to start by using alcohol first on this one to take off the Sharpie. And I'll use it later to clean up after we sand the paint on top off, just because you're supposed to use soap and water, but it takes a while to dry. And I think that it's a better degreaser than just soap and water. So I'm gonna use this isopropyl alcohol. And it's 91%, so you know it really burns whenever you put it in the cuts. It's none of that weak 70%, 50%. So I know it's a pretty strong solvent. Not as strong as acetone, granted, but I don't need acetone to take this Sharpie off. I believe that the Sharpie didn't come off of the first one because I had already clear coated it by the time I realized that the Sharpie wasn't completely painted over. So I got it basically cleaned up and leaving the top ones just so the pattern will match on a top fairing. And now I'm gonna start sanding them, because in order to paint, you have to have a rough surface. And most of this is still a glossy paint, except for where I took out some of the cracks. I got it all cleaned up. There's still a slight bit of Sharpie here, but I think that the sandpaper that I'm going to use to rough up the surface before I start painting will take all of that Sharpie off. So I'll get to sanding here and I'll show you my method of painting the cow pattern on. I'm gonna use these 220 grit sanding discs that I had originally bought to sand down the fiberglass before I started repairing it. And I just don't want them to go to waste, and I also don't want to go buy more stuff. And since it's 220 grit, it will probably turn most of this fiberglass slash paint into fine powder. So I'm gonna use this N95 while I do this. A full respirator would probably work a lot better for protecting me from these, but I think an N95 is better than nothing. And I just don't want to breathe in most of the particles here. And like I said, I'm just taking off the clear coat so it'll look something like this so that the new spray paint will stick to it. So I have it all sanded down and I'm gonna blow off the dust with an air compressor, and then I'll get to wiping down the spots I'm gonna paint with the alcohol again. Once again, I've got my organic solvent, isopropyl alcohol, and this time I have a microfiber cloth to help me degrease the spots I just sanded. So I'm gonna add this to my cloth here and just wipe down all of the spots I just sanded, taking off anything that will stop the new paint from adhering to the surface. This is the cheapest organic solvent I have for cleaning, and since it's isopropyl alcohol, it'll just evaporate and then I don't have to worry about a dry time with soap and water. So that's why I'm using this, and yesterday it worked really well, so I'm gonna do it again today. Now what I've got is some painter's tape and a utility knife, and basically what I'm gonna do is cover everything I don't want painted with this painter's tape, and then I'll take the razor blade and cut the line that I left here for the top, and anywhere that there's not a line I'm just gonna freehand. So I'll just cover this area in tape out here so that I don't overspray it. I might even put some plastic bags down just so I don't have to use so much tape, but I'll just cut a design with the razor blade into this. So like I said, I'm gonna take this razor here and I'm gonna try my best to follow the lines I drew so that this pattern will follow the future patterns of the top piece of the motorcycle. And this will scratch the paint. I'm not too worried about that because what I found out working on my fiberglass is that I have about 3 layers of paint underneath my clear coat, and then underneath that there's a primer. Once you have that cut, you should be able to just pick this right off. Sometimes it's a little tough, but it should just come right up. And now you've got one part of a cow design. So again, you want to make it curvy because most cow spots are pretty curvy. I want it to be as organic as possible. I don't want boxes, so I'm doing my best to do that. And again, I think the razor blade's easier than trying to use this massive handle to do corners and things like that. Just be careful. This is the final product after I've taped and cut. This should cover all of the spots that I want to cover with black paint, and it shouldn't overspray too far. And if it does, I know the alcohol takes it off because the same thing happened yesterday. So I'm gonna get to painting this. I'll show you guys how I paint it, and then I'll clear coat it, and then I'll just let it dry. All I do is make gentle passes with it, and the first layer doesn't have to be thick, so you don't have to make it all black the first time. Just some simple sprays back and forth. This is the first layer, and I'm going to wait until it is tacky and kind of dry to put on the second one. And the second one, I'm gonna try to get all of the white spots I missed the first time. Like I said, you don't wanna lay it on thick the first time. There's really no need to. It'll just mess it up later. And I think that the thinner the first layer, the better it'll adhere. And we can always add layers on top, so no sense in trying to darken it all in one go. Now that I have 3 layers of paint down, I'm gonna move on to clear coat. And it is dry, but still tacky, so I know it's ready. And as you can see, it's not a very professionally done paint job, but that's not the point. The point of this is a temporary permanent solution. And I'm gonna start clear coating this so the paint doesn't come off. I just finished my 3rd layer of clear coat, and while it's still wet, the painter's tape tells you to take it off. So I'm gonna do that and then show you the final result here. The curse of the overspray continues to follow me today. So I'm gonna hit that with some rubbing alcohol and show you the actual final review here. There it is, the final result of my temporary permanent solution. Again, up close, it doesn't look all that great, but I don't plan on keeping it like this forever. I wanted something easy to sand down in the future, and something that still looked like it was intentional. I think this will look great on the motorcycle. So if you don't have money to pay for a paint job, but you do have a few rattle cans laying around and you have a white bike that needs fixed, it's pretty simple. I mean, it didn't take me too long to figure out how to do this, and good luck if you try it.